Welcome to Florida Focus, a college football podcast. We have a lifetime Florida State Seminole fan, that's me, Brandon, and a lifetime Florida Gator fan, that's my co-host, Chris. We're putting aside our differences to bring you the fantastic world of college football throughout the Sunshine State. Today we have a very special episode for our fans, where we will inaugurate our first annual Florida Focus Awards for 6 different categories. We'll discuss the criteria on how we decided this, and we'll welcome your feedback on who your picks might be for these awards. So given today's show, my friend, how are you feeling about the episode?
It is fun. I'm excited. I've never done this before. I've always seen the award shows, but now that we get to kind of quote-unquote host one, put one together, and this is really fun, actually, doing the research and reminiscing and thinking back of all the games and players and putting it together. And it's not as easy as you might think it is.
Right. I feel like there's a few categories that was a little easier than others, but certainly difficult on almost every single statistic and game that we reviewed for this. So completely agree.
Yeah.
So for the fans listening, if you're new to the show, welcome. We want to remind you of the 7 schools that we cover, and so the 7 schools that meet the criteria and are eligible for these awards. So that'll be Florida State Seminoles, the Florida Gators, the UCF Knights, the USF Bulls, FAU Owls, FIU Panthers, and of course Miami Hurricanes.
Yeah.
So we considered players for these 7 schools, and we have 6 unique categories. So here are the categories, and this will be the order that we'll announce these in as well. The first category is Freshman Player of the Year. Second category is Special Teams Player of the Year. Third category is Defensive Player of the Year. Fourth category is Offensive Player of the Year. Fifth category is Coach of the Year. And the 6th and last category is Game of the Year. So, just out of those, Chris, which ones do you think were the hardest, most fun? Got your juices
Actually the Game of the Year was real fun to pick, because it's a category that you don't really talk about too much.
Yeah.
Other category you see, like the Heisman or the Dope Walker or whatever, those, but no one really talks about what was the Game of the Year. So that was real fun to talk about and to think about and try to actually rank it. It's pretty difficult, but that was a more interesting one to me. Yeah,
I agree. I think that one was certainly unique, as you said, and I'll give you credit on that category because that made it the most interesting for sure. The first 4 are all players. You have a coach, and then you have it's kind of a team effort. So
right,
makes it very unique and standalone.
Yeah, and especially with that, you have to pick not because normally I just my favorite games were the games that the Gators won. That's usually the game. That's how I go. But now I'm okay, what else goes into it? Not just my team winning, but or a team from Florida winning. It didn't have to be that. Just what was the best game. So that was pretty fun.
Absolutely. So real quickly before we dive in, we will just give you a quick format. We'll give you the top finalists for each award. We'll discuss the criteria on how we based our votes, and based on a very intricate point system, Chris and I determined who would get the nominations and the award. So any thoughts that you wanted to add on to that, Chris, on how you kind of went into these awards and how you picked them?
Yeah, I'm just going to say from the start, it's very obvious that I'm a little bit biased with the Gators, so I tried to take that away. I try to step back and not just throw a player up there, give them a vote, whatever, rank them high because they're a Gator. I try to be as honest as possible. Mm-hmm. But with that, I haven't watched every single game. So I might not know as much or about a certain player compared to a player on Florida. But I tried to do some research. I did watch some games, but I tried to go into it the best I could, try to be unbiased when I went into ranking them.
Sure. I mean, with anything anybody does in life. There's always some bias on some level. And so we, as an unofficial fan-based podcast, may have some biases there. And I feel like we're very fair with a lot of these players. And there are times that if we're not, and that's the whole basis of the show, we'll call each other out.
Right.
So...
there's a saying you have to take off your orange and blue glasses. And that's what I try to do. And you have to take off your garnet and gold glasses.
Yeah.
To
So
do this.
That's a good caveat. I'll just say for my criteria, a lot of it was numbers and statistics based. I know that's not going to be a shocker to regular fan listeners.
Right.
But I think there is a definitely an emotional element and leadership element to some of the votes I had as well.
Yeah, right.
So what do they bring off the field in the locker room, and what do they mean to their team? That also factored into my vote too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, without any further ado, you ready to get started?
Yeah, let's do this.
All right. So our first award, first annual Florida Focus Award, so 2018, let's just make it a tradition. Why not? Is Freshman of the Year. So we actually have 4 finalists for this award. As you'll see, most of them just have 3. So the 4 finalists, in no particular order, we have Chris Robinson, the quarterback for FAU. We have Damian Pierce, running back for the Florida Gators. We have Tamarian Terry, wide receiver for Florida State. And Evan McPherson, kicker for the Gators. So, any thoughts on the finalists or what they contributed to their team this year?
The surprise you called Terry. He surprised me a bit, and I knew McPherson was going to be decent. I knew because he was a pretty good kicker coming out of high school. Pierce was a shocker, and I didn't know anything about Robinson prior to this season. But to step in as a freshman in any position is tough, but especially quarterback, that's real difficult. And to put up the numbers that he did as a freshman, that's impressive.
All right. Yeah, good thoughts. I think Pierce kind of both surprised us this year, especially when it came down to the voting, that he ranks so high for both of us. Kickers, man, I have a soft spot for them, as I always said. But to have the high percentage he did in the high pressure games, you can't really put a statistic on that.
He missed. Yes. What's the statistic? He missed 2, but really he missed 1.
We both agree he just missed 1.
Yeah. So, but no, 90% for the year, something like that.
Right.
With that quote unquote missed 1.
Unofficial.
Right.
So.
Right. Asterisks. Yeah.
Yep. Tamarian Terry to come in and have all of the huge catches he did to impact the team. And then, like you mentioned with Chris Robinson, to come in the hardest position of the game. Yeah, some of his numbers didn't look as great as some of the other quarterbacks do, but the delta I see on this guy, it's huge upswing.
Right. Absolutely, yeah. The potential is real there. Absolutely. It's definitely there.
So, the winner of this award, envelope please, is Tamarian Terry.
See if I can... Oh.
I was gonna get.
I know. I'm so sorry. I was gonna get an envelope noise. Okay, now go ahead.
Tamarian Terry, wide receiver for Florida State.
Man, the first ever award we throw out there, and I mess it up.
Fumbled it.
I definitely fumbled it. Sometimes you just gotta know when to not go for the joke. Like.
Do you want to do that whole thing again, Chris? We can start.
Yeah,
let's do that again. All right. So, without further ado, the first ever Florida Focus Award goes to...
Hold on one sec. I got an envelope noise for you.
Oh, okay.
Ready?
Okay. Very good.
Here we go.
Tamarian Terry, wide receiver for Florida State.
All right.
Congratulations. Hoorah. Yeah, that was actually probably one of the easiest votes for me, and I know that's come from a Florida State fan. But that was your number 1 vote as well for Freshman of the Year.
Yeah. It was for me. It was McPherson and Terry, but McPherson was solid all year. But Terry was like one of the, if only, bright spots for that Florida State offense.
Yes.
And to do that as a freshman, and the average that he had all year, and 8 touchdowns, is it?
8 touchdowns. Yeah.
Over 20 yards. Per catch, that's really good. That's really good.
Yes.
No matter what year you are, you know.
Absolutely, and he was tied for receiving yards on the season, and but did it with 20 less catches than Nyquan Murray. So that's insane. Those numbers are great. Those are almost Greg Carr, type of numbers. So, congratulations to Marion Terry. Yes, Florida Focus Freshman of the Year.
Yeah, and I think, me personally, Pierce would have gone higher, but Scarlett and Pirine are more, I guess, valuable to the team right now.
Yeah.
But when he came in, he was reliable, and he is a home run threat, and it's a good sign going forward. But that's just kind of why he didn't get as high. But I think Terry definitely deserved it.
Yes, the Florida rushing attack was a little too balanced for an award here. That's the great team effort side of it, but the unfortunate statistic fantasy number side of it. Yeah. Because Pierce had 425 yards rushing on the season with 2 TDs on 65 carries, but your leading rusher, Pirine, only had like 750. Yeah. So it was just so well distributed, you didn't have a guy that stood out.
Yeah.
Which is probably the best problem to have in your offense.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not really complaining about that one.
And Robinson, really good start, as we said. He had 2,500 passing yards, 12 touchdowns, also 12 interceptions. Like to see that number go down, but he was a big rusher, and he ran the RPO, if you will. But there's a lot of other factors that probably went into his year not being quite what we expected. But good on him. He had a really good season. And McPherson, just for a kicker to make that kind of contribution that soon in the SEC, especially. Well done.
Yeah.
All right, Freshman of the Year. I feel like that was very well deserved. Moving on to our next award, Special Teams Player of the Year. So I feel like this comes down to kickers, punters, and returners, correct?
Yeah.
If there are other positions that they play, which some of them do, that's not considered for this award, just their special teams effort.
Yeah.
All right. So we have 3 finalists for this award. No particular order. We have Evan McPherson, the kicker for the Gators. We have DJ Matthews, who is a punt returner. And we have Mac Loudermilk, who is a punter for the UCF Knights.
And Matthews from FSU.
Correct. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah. I don't really like to give FSU some love, but I'll give this time. This time,
yes. So your thoughts on these 3 guys and what they contributed to their teams?
Yeah. I don't really follow, to be honest, like UCF's punter, too much. more as much as you do is what. Right. But I looked at the statistics, and I know you brought his attention to me, so I went back and watched a couple of things from him. And I know Matthews, he looks like he's very dangerous when he gets the ball, not just in the return, but also in screens and stuff like that. But as a returner, he is definitely dangerous. Give him some space, and he can do work. And of course, we already talked about McPherson and how clutch he was, how consistent he was.
Right. Yes. With Loudermilk, it's not a whole lot of long distance punts, although he does have a few of those in him. It's more of the placement of the ball he excels at.
Yeah.
Plus, man, he promoted the heck out of his brand this year, growing out the hair. He wins the Mortel Award, which is the Holder of the Year.
Yeah.
And he's become just quite a sensation and brought a lot of good publicity to the Knights.
Yeah.
So,
and he's probably the best name. If we were giving out best names, he'd probably win that award.
Right. Absolutely. So, yes, big fan of what he's brought to the special teams unit, and I've mentioned enough about him. I won't go into too much detail, but DJ Matthews, Florida State's punt returner, he did have the touchdown against Miami, and that changes things. And he was one of the top 10 in average return yards on punts this year, so that made a huge difference.
Yeah.
So, all right. So those are the finalists, and the Special Teams Player of the Year for Florida Focus Awards goes to...
Envelope, please.
Evan McPherson, kicker for the Florida Gators.
All right.
And, we can't say enough about kickers. There's so much that they do to change momentum, to put points on the board. That's why they're almost always the leading scorers in school history. McPherson came out of nowhere, really, and made a huge difference. You can say all you want about LSU's kicker, that's fine, but that LSU's kicker had experience in the college ranks, even if it was Division II. So my hat goes off to McPherson for sure.
Yeah, the only knock is that he didn't win like a game winner or anything like that. But you know that you just got to get kind of close, and he's going to knock it down.
Right.
Knowing that really helps an offense. And that doesn't really put too much pressure on the quarterback, and no missed extra points. So just really consistent and clutch. That's all you could ask for from a kicker.
Absolutely. 15 of 17 on the year, 45 of 45 in extra points. You're right, though. Second half possessions, and especially the games like South Carolina, LSU, when they really needed some performances, he was there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Yeah, this is going pretty well.
I think so.
Yeah. Next category, another player award, is our Defensive Player of the Year. So we have our 3 finalists here. The first, again, no particular order, Brian Burns, defensive lineman for the Florida State Seminoles, Ja'Kai Polite, defensive end for the Florida Gators, and Shaq Quarterman, linebacker for the Miami Hurricanes. So your thoughts on these 3 players this year?
This was probably the toughest to decide for me. Great talent here, couple surprises. Starting off with Florida and Polite, you knew they had that potential, but man, he just jumped up to another level. Especially with guys like Zuniga and Jefferson at the same position, for you to shine like you do and just show the speed and get your draft stock way up high. It was impressive to see that. And Burns, especially at the beginning of the year, came out just dominant. And as bad as FSU was playing on defense, he was that bright spot for them. And that you're like, okay, they got to figure some stuff out, but he already has figured it out. He looks like an NFL guy right now. And then Quarterman, like we said off air, probably the best linebacker in the state, if not one of them. Right. So, of course, leading that Miami Hurricane defense.
Yes, Shaq Quarterman. Even in the preseason, sometimes you hear a lot of hype about these guys, but his was legit. There was a lot he had to offer the team. He continued to bring pressure. He could continue to force turnovers. If he wasn't the guy recovering a fumble, he was the one forcing it. And he anchored probably one of the best defenses in all of the country. It just got overshadowed by a team that just couldn't move the ball.
Right.
So, huge fan of his. Ja'Kai Polite, just a wrecking ball. He made all kinds of plays all the time, and he changed what the whole face of the defense looked like because of that pressure. And then, I exactly what you said about Brian Burns. The one bright spot, the guy who was clearly NFL bound before the season really got off the ground and, man, came out of the gate really, really hard and fast.
Yeah.
So, all well-deserved. Defensive Player of the Year, Florida Focus, first annual, is Ja'Kai Polite, defensive lineman for the Florida Gators.
Yes.
So, this was the only category where we actually had to bring in a neutral third party to break a tie. Mm-hmm. That's how close it was on the voting between Brian Burns and Ja'Kai Polite. But in the end, I think we both agreed. Even though Brian Burns had more overall tackles on the season, Polite had 11 sacks to Brian Burns' 10. Polite had 4 pass defenses versus 3 for Burns, but 5 forced fumbles versus 3 to Burns. Those are pretty big differences when you're playing on a D-line. It really is.
Yeah. And I think what really bumped Polite up was that I think Burns was clearly the most dominant the first half of the season.
Right. But
Polite was just from beginning to end a monster off the edge there. And 11 sacks in the season, that's too shy of a single season record for the Gators. Alex Brown, I believe, holds that with 13. I don't know. He might get 2 in the bowl game. Don't know. But that's pretty cool that he's there. And I think it's forcing 5 fumbles is so crucial.
Yes.
Throughout the season.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of players get credit for recovering the fumble, and they should. But forcing 5 is just as impressive to me.
Right. When you force a fumble, you have all the control over what's happening on the play. Yes. And Shaq Quarterman, just to throw out some numbers about him, 13 tackles for loss, 76 total in the year, 5 sacks. That's a career best for him. Plus, he did have an interception. That's not hard, or excuse me, not easy to do when you're a linebacker. You kind of have to have a matter of luck, but he also had a fumble recovery and a forced fumble this season. So that's pretty impressive, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
That was a tough one. That was
yeah. Probably the hardest one for me.
Yes.
On here.
Absolutely. I went back and forth a lot on that one.
Yeah.
Shocker, I had Brian Burns first. And you had Ja'Kai Polite first. Although I feel like I'm pretty fair on that, you know. We both struggled to see where they went, but
yeah.
All right, so those are the individual awards. That'll wrap up those 4. So we have 2 more, and again...
No, we still got the offensive.
Ah! I'm just so excited here, I can't count them.
I know.
Man.
I mean, also, to be fair, it's already a foregone conclusion. Like,
yeah.
As close as the defensive was, the offense is the complete opposite of that.
I couldn't agree more. So we'll name the Offensive Player of the Year finalist. No particular order. We have FAU's running back, Devin Singletary. We have FIU's quarterback, James Morgan. And UCF's quarterback, Mackenzie Milton. So, thoughts on what these guys contributed to their squads?
Yeah, Milton, you know him. You know what he's going to bring. Yeah, so these guys put up some great numbers. Singletary, if you look at him from FAU, he was their offense. Like he really was. He was putting up some PlayStation numbers.
Yeah.
Some games, but in some games wasn't. But he was very impressive. And Morgan at FIU, also very impressive, helping them get into a bowl game and really exceeding expectations there. And, of course, Mackenzie Milton, you know what you're going to get with him going into the season, and he did not disappoint.
Yeah, I agree with all those sentiments. The thing that surprised me about Singletary, I'll start with him, is you knew what was coming, and he still couldn't stop him. So, you know, I remember the game he played against, I think it was Bethune-Cookman, he had 5 touchdowns.
Yeah, I was thinking
but only
the same
86 rushing yards. He's a red zone guy, and still couldn't get anything done. So just impressive efforts like that put him so high on the list. Yeah, James Morgan leading your team to 9 wins, which is a program record, winning a bowl game. You know, can't say enough about that. And there's a lot of love to be shown there. His completion percentage was really high as well, so he's very efficient with the ball. But yeah, Mackenzie Milton, and we throw around the term dual threat all the time, but he truly was, and just the pocket presence, to be able to read the defenses, to have the skill players, but to distribute the ball so well. Plus the win streak that UCF has because of his play speaks for itself.
Yeah.
All right. So of our 3 finalists for the Offensive Player of the Year for Florida Focus Awards, the award goes to Mackenzie Milton, quarterback for the UCF Knights. And I feel like you and I agree this one wasn't even that close.
Yeah. You're wrong.
Yep.
mean, Singletary was like the maybe, but I mean, come on. It's Milton.
Right. 307 rushing yards, 9 rushing touchdowns on the year. He had a 59% completion percentage, 2,600 yards passing, 25 TDs, only 6 picks, and only sacked 9 times. And that's without playing 6 quarters. He missed the second half of USF with his knee injury and all of the title game against Memphis.
Yeah.
So, yep, well-deserved there. Yeah, Singletary, though, you're right with the PlayStation numbers. And actually, I was kind of surprised to learn he had more touchdowns and a little more rushing yards last year than this season.
Oh, okay.
So he's still up there, and he's still one of the best talents in the entire state. And then Morgan, that's a great story. It really is. 26 TDs for him. Only gave up 10 sacks, and actually outpassed Mackenzie Milton a little bit. Not by much.
Okay.
So.
But it had to be Milton, though. Like,
yes.
If you watched any UCF game, no matter who the opponent was or when they were down, you do. If he was there, he was going to score and he was going to lead them down. And I think what's impressive really is his legs. As good as a thrower is, his legs are just as impressive.
Absolutely. And the biggest reason, I mean, what an upswing, for a guy that was a walk-on freshman.
Mm-hmm.
And not a walk-on, excuse me. A true freshman is what I meant to say, rather.
Mm-hmm.
Just a couple of seasons ago, just to what he is now. It's impressive.
Yeah.
So, all the best to him, obviously, as he continues to heal from the injury. And it's unfortunate looking like the Knights will be without him most, if not all, of next year.
Yeah, I know.
So, the team will look very different without him. They already do. So.
Yeah.
All right. Well deserved. My apologies for jumping the gun earlier. So that actually does now wrap up our individual player awards.
Yeah.
Of which there were 4. So our next award is Coach of the Year. So I think the 3 finalists are pretty obvious. You have Josh Heupel at UCF, Dan Mullen of the Florida Gators, and Butch Davis at FIU. So your thoughts on the job that these coaches did for their schools this season?
There's a couple surprises. One you kind of was what you kind of expected. Starting with Davis from FIU, you knew that he was a good coach. You knew that he had the potential. But to do what he's doing at FIU, especially this year, getting to a bowl game, real impressive stuff. Heupel is one of those like, okay, you inherited a pretty good team. Don't mess this up, and he didn't. And he didn't mess it up, and they're undefeated. And anytime you beat all the opponents on your schedule, it's impressive stuff. And then how he handled Milton going down, I thought it was just as impressive. And then obviously Mullen with what he's doing with the Gators got a lot of people buzzing, going from no bowl to a January 6th bowl in 1 year. I thought of going 7-5 myself, and then now we're playing Michigan in the Peach Bowl. Like, okay, I didn't think that was going to happen at all, but here we are, and we got guys that weren't even talked about going to the NFL at all, and a ton of guys could potentially go to the NFL. So he's doing a great job up in Gainesville.
Yes, and to echo your sentiment about UCF's coach Josh Heupel, more than taking a team and keep them undefeated, to see his own personal growth as a coach, to go from being fired at Oklahoma's offensive coordinator to bouncing around to some schools and ending up in Missouri and then getting the head coaching job, at the probably best program in the group of 5, that to see his change was to me the most impressive for him this season. Dan Mullen, you knew what you had, and some people had their reasonable doubts so that he could turn things around, and he's quietly hushing all of the critics. And I'm not calling you one of those, by the way, Chris. I'm not.
I am hushed, that's for sure.
Well, but I wouldn't call you a critic, though. I think a lot of your concerns were well founded.
I don't have enough credit to be a critic. You're right.
A lot of it was well founded, because you as Florida, you would think, okay, I'm not so sure. Sure he has the history, sure he has track record, but to change and go from was it 4 wins last year to 9 this season? Hard to argue that success. And then, of course, Butch Davis. Him, a guy from Oklahoma who's, he had a bad NFL stint, and then, he was a legendary coach with the Canes and had some trouble in UNC. You don't know what to expect. But to come to a school like this, to a state as we are somewhat biased in knowing that has all of some of the best players and start to turn things around, it's just really good for the whole state of Florida. All right. So those are 3 finalists. So the Coach of the Year for the Florida Focus Awards goes to Dan Mullen of the Florida Gators.
This was a tough one too, because I really, really considered Heupel for what he did, go undefeated, dealing with Milton, but you got to go with Mullen. Just the big turnaround, the jump in wins. Potentially 10-win season after going 4 last year, and just really getting people to buy in,
right.
Fans to players, getting a buzz. I think of that 2 games of Mississippi State LSU back to back. We were like, oh my, this is a different team than we're used to, and the hype is real.
Yes, indeed. I like how you said that's hype, and then Josh Heupel.
Okay.
There's been plenty of marketing puns based off of that, and as you can imagine. But yeah, I agreed. They were Heupel and Mullen were pretty much dead even to me until I saw the change in wins with +5 this year. That's what really sold me on it. So,
but really, in Heupel's defense, can you get a +5 if you go to undefeated last year?
That's a good point. You're basically taking, and this is the same for Mullen. You're taking guys that were recruited under different coaching staff, and you're turning them around. So, there were several first-year coaches in the state of Florida this year, and they were clearly head and shoulders above the rest.
So good for him.
Absolutely. All right. Coach of the Year for Florida Focus Awards. That'll bring us to our last category, which is Game of the Year. So, I think the criteria on this one, the only thing to kind of asterisk this with would be any game that one of those 7 Florida teams played in.
Right.
Whether or not it was against another Florida team.
Right, exactly. Whether or not they won or not.
Good point. Absolutely. So, the 3 finalists for the Florida Focus Awards Game of the Year would be the Gators versus the LSU Tigers, Florida State at Miami, and the UCF Memphis AAC title game.
Mm-hmm.
So when you watched these games, what were your thoughts as it was all coming down to the wire?
We'll start off with the one you just mentioned, UCF Memphis, and that. What a huge build up to this game, especially Memphis all before. It's a conference championship game. They're down early. The story with Milton, and for them to rally back and to win convincingly, that huge turnout. It's like 2 different games being played. The first half and the second half. 2 different teams that UCF put out there, but they rallied back, and it was a great game for them. Look at UF and LSU. This is what put UF on the map, beating a then-ranked 5 LSU team back and forth. Some trickeration there, a pick 6 to seal it, and the swamp was rocking. And then the FSU Miami game, another comeback, and Miami. You thought going into this that Miami was just going to wipe the floor with Florida State, and it wasn't the case. For three and a half quarters, something like that. But then Miami got things going, and for them to come back like they did against their rival was huge.
Absolutely, yeah. For UCF in the title game against Memphis to go down 17, to be turning the ball over at crazy points and not seeming to have any grasp on the game and giving these huge runs up to Darrell Henderson, you just think it's over. And then UCF just comes out in the second half and they score on, I think, 4 or 5 straight possessions and only give up 3 points. Quite the turnaround, and what a way to end their season. Mm-hmm. The game you mentioned, LSU visiting the Swamp. It was 1-point game late. You had the late pick 6 to go up by 8, but even then, not totally sure how the game ends. The LSU had a chance to go down and score late. Burrow's never thrown a pick before that, and it's impressive to see how the Gators really showed up in that game and had the best win of their season.
Yeah.
And Florida State and Miami had pretty much everything, right?
Yeah.
You had the push and shoving before the game started. You had the comeback. You had the 20-point lead. You had it all.
Controversial call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to argue that any of these games couldn't have been a finalist for this. So all fantastic and quality, entertaining football for sure.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So those are the 3 finalists. So for the Florida Focus Awards 2018, the Game of the Year goes to Florida State at Miami. Mm-hmm. And this was a tough one too. Believe it or not, I actually voted for UF versus LSU, but for all the reasons we already mentioned, there's so many things about the Florida State Miami game that just kept people watching and kept you intrigued.
Yeah. And it was just crazy that a lot of factors into this. Obviously, the rivalry game, the fact that it's 2 Florida schools playing each other. There's this massive comeback Yeah, it was just a. It was a. I know you're not gonna like to hear me say this, but it was a fun game to watch.
Hmm.
I know for you, you didn't like the outcome of it, but the game itself was just a good classic. Anytime you have a game with a comeback, it's a fun one. But yeah, that was a good one. And UF LSU, it was hard not to put that at number one,
Yeah.
but FSU Miami for me was the game of the year, and really. Any of the UCF Memphis games could have been up there as well.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so with the Knowles, going to South Florida, this was just kind of one of those typical things. You're like, okay, I just know where this is heading.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, to look at it, retrospectively, you look at Taggart, you're like, well, the first half of the Miami game was the best half of Florida State played the entire season.
Yeah.
They really brought it out and they played hard for this game, and they had it well coached and they had it well schemed. And early third quarter, you had DJ Matthews return a punt for a touchdown, and they go up by 20. You're like, okay, Florida State might actually hang on, and there wasn't any reason to believe they would lose the game at that point.
Yeah.
Until Miami's defense started to really turn around in the third quarter. Florida State saw it slipping away. All of a sudden, they bust out the trick play. ACC refs don't even take the time to review it. Said it wasn't even close. And it stings, but that's what makes it a memorable game.
Right.
The controversy, and we kind of love that as much as we hate to admit it, especially as Knoll fans. When you come out on the wrong side of a call, any school would feel that way. But
yeah,
yep,
it's definitely an instant classic. Whether you like it or not, it's definitely an instant classic.
Right. There you go. And UF LSU, I ranked that one highest because of the talent on the field. And to me, it had some of the best players. And at the state of Florida, it was the best one to me. But yes, UCF Memphis, I don't think these guys know how to play a blowout. Out of the last 4 times they played, only once has it been more than, maybe 10 points, and it was always close in the rest. So, that's always good and exciting to see.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. Well, that'll wrap up the first annual Florida Focus Awards. Any last thoughts there? I'm sorry I interrupted you. You had a question.
No. Do you want to just real quick, just go over some honorable mentions of the categories there?
You bet. So let's backtrack a little bit. We'll go back to Freshman of the Year. So I'll mention some of these, Chris, and then you just throw it to you. What were some of the thoughts you had? Other freshmen that were really high up, Darryl Mack Jr., the quarterback for UCF who came in and Mackenzie Milton's stead. Felix, the wide receiver for the South Florida Bulls. We also had some votes for Ford, running back for South Florida, Jalen Woodby at Florida State. And, so that kind of rounds out the list there.
Yeah, all good candidates. Man, Mac, just kind of what he did in that short time was impressive. But really can't give him too much just because it was just a couple games. But he looked pretty good, though. He looked pretty good when he was in.
Sure. I agree with that. Felix's numbers at South Florida were surprisingly good. Anytime you have over 500 receiving yards in a year, that's going to grab the eye. I also thought Jordan, the tight end from Miami, had a pretty good season. 30 catches for 4 touchdowns. That's a little more than you expect for a tight end. So good for them. Special teams players, honorable mention. We also had Townsend, the punter for the Gators. Kenneth White, the returner for FAU Owls. Otis Anderson at UCF. He was also a returner with a high average. Freddie Swain, returner for the Gators. Matt Wright, or Matty Ice as they call him, the kicker for the UCF Knights. And then Terrence Horn, a returner for the South Florida Bulls.
Yeah, I was impressed with Townsend. His brother was here, and some called him the best punter ever at Florida, and to fill in those shoes, literally.
Yeah.
and to do what he did at Florida was very impressive and really helped with field position all year.
Yes, Townsend was pretty high up there on the votes as well.
Yeah,
and I think Freddie Swain and Terrence Horn are both really good returners that just with injury, unfortunately, couldn't play the whole year. Terrence Horn had 2 touchdowns on 6 kickoff returns in the first 3 games. He goes down with an ACL injury, but he was only a freshman, so watch out. He's going to be
Yeah.
back, and he's going to be good.
Yeah, and I was surprised Miami had 2 returners that I thought were Dallas and Thomas both whenever
Right.
they touched the ball. Were pretty dangerous, too. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Absolutely. Yes. I forgot to mention those. I apologize, but we talked
Huh?
about them before the show, too.
Yeah, yeah.
Excellent. All guys that definitely caught our attention. So, defensive other players of the year, Jalen Woodby at Florida State, Hill, defensive lineman for UCF, Gibson was a safety for the Knights, Joseph, linebacker for the Gators, all kind of caught our eye and got some points from us.
Yeah, yeah. And, yeah, obviously I'm going to talk a lot about Florida players because I know them the most, but Joseph kind of being the second fiddle to Reese and then really showing out this year and being a force to be reckoned with. Wishing he would be a little more consistent.
Okay.
And because sometimes he gets out of assignment, but he has those ones, especially that LSU game. He was definitely gave them fits the whole time.
Yep. And a couple of thoughts. Woodby was definitely a good presence, and he ranked pretty high in our freshman rankings as well. To come on and contribute like that for a defense that had a lot of struggles, that certainly means something. Tristan Hill, defensive lineman for UCF. The only problem with the reason he didn't get a little more love in numbers is because his defense doesn't put him in good position to shine, and it's always like if UCF has 3 or 4 sacks a game, he has 1 or 2 of them.
Right.
But they usually don't get a lot of pressure, and they give up a lot of running yards. So it's hard to get those numbers higher when the rest of your team doesn't support you.
Mm.
Otherwise, some of those guys rank higher. And then Gibson, a sturdy staple of the secondary for the Knights.
Yeah.
All right.
And
Offensive player of the year. This was a fun one, too. I think offense, you have the numbers you're more familiar with, so it's easier to kind of categorize. Cronkrite, running back who was a Gator transfer at one point to South Florida, had a fantastic season. Felipe Franks and Adrian Killens both tied in votes for us. Adrian Killens is a running back for UCF. Felipe Franks is a quarterback for the Gators. Tamarian Terry ranked pretty high. Gabe Davis, wide receiver for the Knights. And then running back Homer for the Miami Hurricanes.
yeah, yeah, I was impressed with Killens this year. Man, he give him some open space and he is gone. So he's a good weapon for them.
Yep. Cronkrite, he was one of the reasons why they had a 7-game win streak to start the year.
Right.
He had over 1,000 yards, rushing 9 touchdowns. Certainly contributed. Franks, the growth I saw with him this year was fantastic. He almost threw 300 passes this year, 2,200 yards, 23 touchdowns, only 6 picks. The 12 sacks is a little bit higher than you'd probably like, but and in my opinion, and this may not be clear to everybody else, but he was clearly the leader of the team. It may not have been as obvious in the middle parts of the year, but I feel like he probably was.
Well, as he went, the team went, and when he got motivated, and when he got a fire lit under him, as they say, he was a different player, and he definitely led us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like he deserved those votes, and if he continues on the path, he's a contender for finals next year.
Yeah. We could probably just skip coaches because
yeah.
Really, there was only those 3 to talk about.
Right. After that, it was okay, who's the worst?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. We'll skip that one. And then game of the year, we actually did have a few others we kind of toyed with. The UCF Memphis regular season game.
Yeah.
Obviously a 1-point victory for the Knights. Florida State Boston College, a lot of talent on the field there. And then USF Tulsa. Not as much talent on the field there, but it was the closest, most entertaining because you had they trailed with 22 seconds left, and they go down and kick a field goal to win in like 2 or 3 plays, and not easy to do.
No. Yeah, it was a really exciting game. Not all of them were them for the Bulls, but
right,
well, for sure.
Yep. A couple others that I'll mention really quickly. I thought the the Gator Gamecock game was very good. Obviously, that's where
Yeah.
you saw the game turn around. If you're talking about comebacks, that was the best one in the state this year for sure.
Yeah, that one that was on my list. That definitely was. That was a fun, exciting game, and that was one of those like. Once we got down, I was like, "We're not coming back. It's not happening." But we did, and that really saved our season for sure.
Yes, very good. There are so many other players we could have considered or maybe bumped up the list, Chris. Any last thoughts on how you think we did, top to bottom, and what the fans may have feedback wise?
Oh yeah, we're probably way off. I'm pretty sure that.
Oh,
Not way off. I think our winners are good, but I just know that how could there's going to be someone or somebody. How could you forget this one or not even mention this guy? Or that happens. That's definitely going to happen. But I like our winners though. I absolutely do.
Right, and I think I agree with that sentiment. If we were to have released like a full top 10, there would have been quite a bit of parity. After about 4 or 5, but I really feel like we got it right.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I do.
We got it right.
Yeah. So
yeah, just let me just finish patting my back.
Yeah, okay. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this. I welcome any of the winners of the Florida Focus Awards on this show to accept their award.
Yes. Let's
So
do that.
if you would love to come on, I will make sure that you get the trophy that I am staring at right now. We appreciate your feedback and participation. I think we also failed to mention this, Chris, but I'll mention it now. We are not considering any postseason play with these awards.
Yeah.
This is regular season only.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All right.
So all that happens, the polls is irrelevant as far as us picking the winners.
Absolutely. So we mentioned that the fans probably have their own list. They had some players that they feel like maybe didn't get considered. How can we expect them to reach out to us, Chris?
All right, yeah. Start off with our website, FloridaFocusPodcast.libsyn.com. Libsyn, Libsyn. Facebook and YouTube, Florida Focus Podcast. Hit us up at Twitter, at Florida Focus Pod. Feel free to email us with your list or tell us where we were way off or what we got right. Florida Focused Podcast at yahoo.com. Snapchat and Instagram, FL Focus Pod, and of course our Patreon account.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much to the fans. If you have a minute, we would appreciate you subscribing to the show and give us some feedback. You can hit 5 stars. That's wonderful. We love that. But take maybe 30 seconds to a minute and give us a couple sentences on what you get from the show, how we can improve it, and what we're doing right so we can continue to do that.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts on the Florida Focus Awards, the first annual trophy ceremony we presented, or any thoughts on the show?
The only thought is that I'm a little sad that I didn't wear my tux. Maybe next year I will wear the tux.
Yeah.
Really get into it. No, this was fun. This was a lot of fun.
It was. Maybe at least a tuxedo T-shirt next year would.
Yeah, there we go. Now we're talking.
Yeah, we can make that happen. Yeah. So the fans, thank you again for the listen. This is Brandon. Thank you so much. Go Noles.
Go Gators.